Myth number 2. Fibromyalgia isn't debilitating / they're just lazy. Now this is definitely a myth because people with fibromyalgia, they're not the same for everybody. One person's experience of fibromyalgia will undoubtedly differ from another person with fibromyalgia in terms of symptoms and severity. So while some people with fibromyalgia may be able to lead active lives, there are days where even they can be debilitated to some degree. For others like myself, it can be hard to lead an active lifestyle without consequences that impact daily life. So these can be, for instance, due to pain, excessive fatigue, brain fog, or even weakness of the muscles. This can be muscular fatigue. My experience with fibromyalgia, I'm going to share a little bit with you just so you can get a picture, since I'm on the more severe, moderate to severe side of fibromyalgia. There we go, got it out. My experiences with fibromyalgia, they disabled me for over a year before I found out what all of my symptoms meant and that they were all connected to one thing, and how I can treat them. So my symptoms vary from day to day, hour to hour, and it can I'm sorry, see, this is some of the brain fog. So we'll start with that, the brain. I experience poor concentration, difficulty with recall, slowed thoughts, and other symptoms associated with brain fog, or as we call it, fibro fog. And this can interfere with having meaningful conversations, especially for longer durations of time. I'm on medications for these things. However, it's not necessarily a magic, it's, take the pill and it's gone. I still struggle with it, but I don't struggle with it as bad as I did before. So the next one would be my physical pain. So being active can be a struggle because of the chronic pain that I have. There are days where I'm not in pain as long as I'm not being active. If I'm sitting at the computer or resting in bed, it could be pretty mild, or like I'm not as bothered by it where I need to be taking medications. I can maybe just rub a little lotion on me if I need to, and that's it. The medications I'm taking have greatly reduced my pain. However, it is not completely erased, and it's not likely to be completely erased for other people either. So for me, being physically active can be a real challenge due to instability of my walking, weakness of my legs, which can start to shake or they give out. This can be rather difficult. For example, going grocery shopping is something that can be rather difficult for me to do because I'm reaching, I'm looking around, I'm leaning over to put things in the cart. Luis is generally pretty helpful in helping me do all these things. However, sometimes I do want to be active. I want to do things for myself and be independent. Of course, there's heavier things that I can't do, especially if I'm getting up and down. I can't do that because of the fatigue I'll get and the pain, which I usually, even while grocery shopping, get pain in my neck, my shoulders, my upper back, my lower back. Sometimes it goes into my arms. So that's one form of physical activity. The other form of physical activity would be walking. Like I mentioned, my knees can shake and get weak. Excuse me. So some days as little as 5 minutes at a slow pace, which would be number 1 on the treadmill, can have me buckle and just collapse. Other days I can do about 15 to 20 minutes. It's really just, I have no control over what's gonna happen, when it's gonna happen. The only thing I can do is respond appropriately, acknowledge my body is not working appropriately, and hey, it's time for a rest, which can be very difficult because before I was a very active person in that I worked 12-hour shifts. I would get teased for running up and down the halls. So it's really hard to learn to slow down. So the other thing that I've learned is assistive devices can be for people with fibromyalgia. I used to think completely otherwise because there's nothing that you can see physically wrong with me unless I'm limping or I'm shaking, but there's no deformity. There's not a cast. Like, there's nothing that really says, hey, I'm disabled, especially because I go back and forth between the severities. It made me feel like it's not for me. But I've learned that yes, assistive devices can be for people with fibromyalgia. It could be maybe due to the fatigue that makes it impossible for you to really do much else throughout the day unless you use these devices to help you with that. It could be with instability. I've seen a lot of people have trouble with this, so this is something that you can use and not feel bad about. So this is something that comes from society's bias against invisible illnesses, this mentality of it's not for me. Especially invisible illnesses is just very difficult. The phrase suck it up is more often heard when people say that they have pain or they're tired. However, fibromyalgia pain and fibromyalgia weakness or fatigue is not the same as somebody else's tired or somebody else's pain. It's chronic, it's long, over like daily periods of time, and it doesn't just go away. So it can become very draining on a person. So going back to the assistive devices, I said it was pretty common. I wrote recently on a fibromyalgia support group on Facebook, trying to see if anybody else had used assistive devices or had difficulty walking. I had over 170 responses in just a few days telling me, yes, I have trouble walking. Yes, I use assistive devices. Yes, it's become almost completely debilitating to me. So it's a lot more common than you think, and you should never be ashamed to use these devices. So I actually did a video on assistive devices. If you watch the end, you'll get to hear what I named my assistive devices. I have a walker, a cane, and a wheelchair. So that is a little bit on that. Now, when it comes to rest and relaxation, it is doctor's orders. If someone with fibromyalgia says that they need rest, believe them and encourage them to rest, because it is something that is important with fibromyalgia: energy management, conservation of energy. And this is through paced activities. So this can actually be very difficult for someone, but reducing the stress and the activity is something that is beneficial and keep them going throughout the day rather than short bursts and then completely wiped out for the day or the next day. This can be difficult, especially if somebody is active. So believe it or not, it can be very difficult for somebody with fibromyalgia to accept the need to rest and relax, because it is frustrating to not be able to be active and independent and doing everything you can do before in the amount of time you can do it in before. If somebody with fibromyalgia asks you for help, please consider it and know that it often takes a lot to reach out. So that is a wrap on fibromyalgia not being debilitating and that they're just lazy. We can tell that that's completely that's debunked.